The atmosphere aboard Vanguard Station hummed with an undercurrent of tension. The massive space installation, a gleaming testament to interspecies cooperation, orbited at the edge of known space, its countless windows glittering against the velvet backdrop of stars. Within its metal corridors and vast chambers, representatives from 24 species moved with purpose, their varied physiologies and cultural displays creating a living tapestry of galactic diversity. General Kaeldar stood like a statue in the central observation deck, his scaled hands clasped behind his back as he surveyed the arriving diplomatic vessels. His imposing 7-foot frame was encased in the ceremonial armor of the KRYLL High Command, obsidian plates inlaid with crimson insignia that denoted his numerous battle honors. The light gleamed off his reptilian scales, highlighting the deep emerald coloration that marked him as a member of the warrior caste. 3 more delegations have docked, General, reported his aide, a younger KRYLL whose scales bore the duller sheen of inexperience. Including the Terrans. Kaeldar's nostril slits flared slightly, the only outward sign of his displeasure. The humans. How quaint that they were invited. They're full members of the Concord now, sir. Membership can be granted by bureaucrats with the stroke of a stylus. Commander Vexar, Kaeldar rumbled, his voice carrying the distinctive rasp characteristic of his species. But respect must be earned through centuries of proven loyalty and strength. He turned from the viewport, his movements precise and measured. The KRYLL had been among the founding members of the Galactic Concord 3 centuries ago. They had fought in the Hive Wars, stood against the Void Incursion, and helped establish the very peacekeeping protocols that maintained order across hundreds of star systems. And now, these soft-skinned newcomers, barely a century into their interstellar phase, were granted equal status in deliberations that would shape the future of galactic security. It was offensive. The security protocol for the summit are in place. Kaeldar asked, pushing these thoughts aside. He had a duty to perform, regardless of his personal feelings. Yes, General, though the Terran delegation has requested some modifications to accommodate their unique physical requirements. Kaeldar suppressed a derisive snort. Denied. They will adapt to our standards, not the reverse. The Concord survived millennia before humanity crawled out of its cradle. They will conform to established protocol. Sir, with respect, the Concord Charter does specify that accommodations must be. I'm aware of the Charter, Commander. Kaeldar cut him off sharply. But security cannot be compromised for comfort. The humans will manage. They pride themselves on their adaptability, do they not? Vexadar lowered his gaze in deference. Yes, General. I'll convey your decision. As his aide retreated, Kaeldar returned his attention to the viewport. The Terran vessel was clearly visible now, sleek and gleaming with a design aesthetic distinctly different from the angular practicality favored by the KRYLL. Humans. So young, so presumptuous. In his 57 years of military service, he had watched with growing concern as these newcomers gained influence disproportionate to their contributions. Perhaps this summit would finally demonstrate to them their proper place in the hierarchy of galactic civilization. Cadet Illyra Vance stood at rigid attention as Ambassador Linera delivered final instructions to the Terran delegation. At 23, Illyra was the youngest member present, having earned her place through a competitive selection process at the Terran Alliance Space Academy. Her dark hair was pulled back in the regulation style, and her blue uniform bore the silver insignia of a final-year cadet. This summit represents a crucial opportunity, Ambassador Linera was saying, her experienced diplomat's voice measured and clear. The security protocols being established here will determine interstellar peacekeeping operations for decades to come. It is vital that Earth's perspective is adequately represented. Illyra listened attentively, honored to be part of such an important mission. For centuries, the Galactic Concord had been dominated by the founding species, the KRYLL, Valerians, and Nexari. Humanity's admission 2 decades ago had been controversial, and even now, their voice in Concord affairs was often marginalized. Cadet Vance, The ambassador addressed her directly. You will accompany Lieutenant Commander Zhou and myself to the preliminary security briefing. Your academic analysis of cross-species security protocols was impressive. I want your observations. Yes, Ambassador, Elara replied, suppressing the surge of excitement. This was an unprecedented opportunity for a cadet to participate in high-level diplomatic proceedings to witness interstellar politics firsthand rather than through simulator programs at the Academy. Remember, we are guests here, Linera continued, her gaze sweeping across the delegation. But we are also equal members of the Concord. Conduct yourselves with dignity and confidence. As the briefing concluded, Elara followed the ambassador and Lieutenant Commander Zhou through the docking bay and into the main body of Vanguard Station. The artificial gravity felt slightly heavier than Earth standard, calibrated to KRYLL physiology, she realized, recalling her xenobiology studies. A small disadvantage, but a symbolic reminder of whose territory they were entering. The corridors of Vanguard Station were a marvel of engineering, vast and gleaming, designed to accommodate beings of widely varying physiologies. They passed a group of methane-breathing Halaxians in environmental suits, nodded respectfully to a towering Nexari diplomat, and stepped aside for a maintenance crew of diminutive Rill. Impressive, isn't it? Lieutenant Commander Zhou murmured beside her. My first off-world assignment was a supply station near Proxima. Nothing like this. Elara nodded, taking in the architectural grandeur. It's like a city in space. A city with very specific power dynamics. Ambassador Linera added quietly. Watch and learn, Cadet. The formal proceedings are only half the story. The real diplomacy happens in the margins. They arrived at a massive set of doors emblazoned with the Galactic Concord insignia, a stylized spiral galaxy cradle between protective hands of varying anatomies. 2 KRYLL security officers stood at attention, their posture perfect, their expressions unreadable behind reptilian features. Ambassador Linera of Terra, the diplomat, announced herself. With my delegation for the Security Council briefing. The guards verified their credentials with a retinal scan, and the massive doors slid open to reveal a circular chamber dominated by a holographic display of the station. Around it stood representatives from a dozen species, their attention now turning to the new arrivals. At the center stood a KRYLL military officer whose ornate armor and commanding presence immediately identified him as a high-ranking official. His cold, serpentine eyes fixed on the human delegation with unmistakable disdain. The Terrans, he announced, making the word sound like an unfortunate medical condition. How good of you to join us. We were beginning to wonder if your species had difficulty interpreting standard time protocols. Ambassador Lenar's expression remained diplomatically neutral. General Kaeldar, I presume. The Terran delegation appreciates the opportunity to contribute to these important proceedings. The slight delay was due to station docking procedures. Kaeldar made a dismissive gesture. Of course, no doubt our technology is challenging for newer members to navigate. Let us proceed. Elara felt a flush of indignation at the thinly veiled insult, but maintained her professional demeanor as they took their assigned places. The briefing began with Kaeldar outlining security measures for the summit, force field configurations, identification protocols, emergency response procedures. The threat assessment indicates a 17% increased risk of disruptive action during this summit, the general continued. Intelligence suggests elements opposed to the Concord's expansion policies may attempt to undermine our proceedings. What specific intelligence supports this assessment? Lieutenant Commander Zhou inquired, his tone respectful but direct. Kaeldar's scaled brow ridge lifted slightly. Intelligence gathered through established KRYLL networks, Lieutenant. Methods proven reliable through centuries of implementation, long before humans joined the galactic community. With respect, General, Zhou pressed, specific threat vectors would help all delegations better prepare their own security protocols. Your delegation need not concern itself with such matters, Kaeldar replied coldly. The KRYLL security force will handle all protective measures. You need only follow instructions. Ambassador Linera leaned forward slightly. General, as full members of the Concord, the Terran Alliance is entitled to participate in security planning, not merely comply with decisions made without our input. A tense silence fell over the chamber. Alara watched the interplay carefully, noting how representatives from other species seemed to be studying the exchange with interest. This was more than a procedural disagreement. It was a test of humanity's standing. Kaeldar's scaled lips pulled back in what might have been a smile on a mammalian face, but appeared predatory on his reptilian features. Ambassador, your species' enthusiasm for participation is commendable. However, security is not a democracy. It requires experience, discipline, and capabilities that, frankly, humans have yet to demonstrate convincingly. Before Linera could respond, a commotion erupted near the chamber entrance. A flustered Valerian technician rushed in, his four-fingered hands clutching a data terminal. General, forgive the interruption, the technician said, bowing deeply. There's been an incident in the environmental control sector. The atmospheric calibration for the main conference chamber is malfunctioning. Kaeldar's eyes narrowed. Explain. The system is registering anomalous commands, possibly a cyber intrusion attempt. The calibration was altered to settings that would be uncomfortable for several delegations. The general's attention snapped to the Terran group. Interesting timing. Technical disruptions as we discuss security protocols with our newest members. Lieutenant Commander Zhou straightened. General, surely you're not implying. I imply nothing. Kaeldar cut him off. I merely observe. Your species has demonstrated remarkable aptitude for computer systems. Perhaps overly remarkable. Ambassador Linara's voice remained steady. General Kaeldar, the Terran Alliance categorically rejects any insinuation of sabotage. In fact, we offer our technical assistance in resolving the issue. How generous, Kaeldar replied, his voice dripping with sarcasm. But I believe we can manage without further Terran assistance. He turned to the Valerian. Implement security protocol Omega-7. Full system diagnostic and trace the intrusion. The technician nodded and hurried out. Kaeldar addressed the chamber at large. This briefing will resume in 1 hour. All delegations, except security personnel, are dismissed. As the representatives began to file out, Kaeldar moved to intercept the Terran delegation. Ambassador Linera, a moment. Alara tensed slightly as the general loomed over them, his physical presence intimidating even to those accustomed to interspecies encounters. I hope this incident isn't representative of what we can expect from Earth during these proceedings, Kaeldar said, his voice low but carrying enough for nearby delegates to overhear. The Concord has standards of conduct that have served us well for centuries. As does the Terran Alliance, General, Linera replied evenly. Standards that include the presumption of innocence and evidence-based accusations. Ah yes, your quaint legal traditions. Kaeldar's mouth curved in that predatory, not-quite smile again. How fortunate that you've never faced the true threats that lurk in the void. It breeds a certain naivety. Lieutenant Commander Zhou stepped forward slightly. The people of Earth have faced and overcome challenges throughout our history, General. We may be newcomers to your community, but we're quick studies. Kaeldar's attention shifted to Zhou, his eyes narrowing. Indeed, and yet your delegation cannot even arrive on time for a basic security briefing. One wonders what other lapses might occur under more stressful circumstances. The delay was due to station procedures, General. Alara found herself saying, unable to remain silent in the face of such blatant disrespect. Our shuttle was held in the secondary docking queue for 23 minutes despite having priority clearance. All eyes turned to her, the junior-most member of the delegation speaking out of turn. Ambassador Linera gave her a warning glance, but Alara continued, her voice clear and respectful despite her rising indignation. The logs will confirm this. Perhaps there are inefficiencies in the docking protocols that warrant review. rather than assumptions about Terran competence. For a moment, Kaeldar seemed taken aback by this unexpected challenge from a mere cadet. Then his expression hardened, scales flushing a darker green with anger. "You address a general of the KRYL Defense Force, girl," he hissed. "Your species' lack of proper military discipline is precisely why humans remain unsuited for full participation in Concord security matters." Ambassador Linera intervened smoothly. "Cadet Vance speaks with the passion of youth, General, but her factual observation stands. We would appreciate a review of the docking procedures to prevent future misunderstandings." Kaeldar ignored the ambassador, his reptilian gaze fixed on Alara. "What is your name and rank, human?" Alara straightened to attention. "Cadet Alara Vance, 4th year, Terran Alliance Space Academy, sir." "A cadet." Kaeldar's voice was thick with contempt. "Not even a commissioned officer. And yet you presume to question the operational efficiency of Vanguard Station." "I stated a factual observation, General," Alara replied, maintaining her composure, "as I was trained to do at the Academy." "Your Academy clearly fails to teach proper respect for superior officers and species with greater experience in interstellar matters," Kaeldar said. "Perhaps that explains why your kind continues to blunder through diplomatic relations like children playing at politics." The insult to humanity was so blatant, so deliberately provocative, that several nearby delegates shifted uncomfortably. Ambassador Linara's expression remained controlled, but her eyes flashed with barely contained anger. "General Kaeldar," Linara said, her voice taking on a formal edge, "the Terran Alliance respectfully reminds you that Article 3 of the Concord Charter explicitly prohibits discriminatory language based on species or evolutionary status. Your comments border on violation of those principles." Kaeldar's nostril slits flared. "Do not presume to lecture me on Concord principles, Ambassador. I was defending this alliance while your ancestors were still discovering spaceflight." His gaze returned to Alara. "As for this, Cadet, her disrespect only confirms my assessment of human readiness for meaningful participation." "With respect, General," Alara said, her voice steadier than she felt, "disagreement is not the same as disrespect. The Terran Alliance has earned its place in the Concord through diplomatic engagement, scientific contribution, and adherence to interspecies cooperation principles. We simply ask for the same respect accorded to other member species." A tense silence fell. Several other delegates had paused to witness the exchange, creating an impromptu audience. Kaeldar seemed to become acutely aware of this scrutiny, his posture stiffening further. "You speak of respect," he said, his voice dangerously quiet, "yet you challenge a superior officer publicly. This is the human way." He stepped closer to Alara, using his height to full intimidating effect. "On KRYL Prime, such insubordination would result in immediate disciplinary action. Cadet Vance is under my authority, General," Ambassador Linera interjected, stepping between them. "Any concerns about her conduct should be addressed to me." Kaeldar's eyes never left Alara's face. "Is this what the Terran Alliance sends to represent them? Untested children who hide behind diplomatic immunity when confronted with their impertinence?" Something in Alara, perhaps the cumulative weight of the dismissive treatment, perhaps the insult to her species, or perhaps simply the burning injustice of the moment, refused to be cowed. "Humanity doesn't define strength merely by age or military might, General," she said quietly. "We value adaptation, innovation, and moral courage. Those qualities earned us our place here." Kaeldar's reaction was immediate and shocking. His scaled hand whipped out with reptilian speed, striking Alara across the face with enough force to snap her head to the side. The sound echoed in the suddenly silent chamber. "Learn your place, human," he snarled. Time seemed to slow for Alara. The sting of the blow registered distantly, but foremost in her mind was the academy training that had become instinct through thousands of hours of practice. In that crystallized moment, she was no longer a diplomat in training, but a Terran Alliance cadet responding to a direct physical threat. Her body moved with precision honed through the Academy's enhanced combat program, a synthesized martial system that combined ancient Earth techniques with modern biofeedback technology. In one fluid motion, she stepped inside Kael'thar's guard, exploiting the follow-through of his strike. Her right hand snapped up to catch his wrist, while her left executed a precise strike to a nerve cluster just below the Carolel's shoulder joint, a vulnerable point known to few outside specialized xenobiology circles. Kael'thar's eyes widened in shock as his arm went numb. Before he could recover, Alara had executed a perfect leverage throw, using the general's forward momentum and superior weight against him. The KRYL commander found himself flipped and slammed onto his back on the polished floor with breathtaking force. Alara maintained her hold on his wrist, applying a joint lock that exploited another KRYL physiological vulnerability, the limited lateral rotation of their primary arm joints. The pressure was precisely calculated, painful enough to immobilize, but not sufficient to cause permanent damage. Kael'thar's expression transformed from shocked disbelief to sudden agony. A strangled sound escaped his throat as he realized he was completely at the mercy of the human cadet he had just struck. "Release me," he gasped, his free hand scrabbling ineffectually against the polished floor. "Release me immediately." Alara maintained the hold, her training keeping her emotions in check despite the adrenaline flooding her system. "General, with respect, physical assault of diplomatic personnel violates Article 7 of the Concord Charter and Section 12 of the Interspecies Conduct Code." The entire chamber had frozen in tableau. Ambassador Linera stood with one hand half raised, caught between diplomatic horror and grudging admiration. Lieutenant Commander Zhou looked, similarly conflicted. Around them, delegates from a dozen species watched in stunned silence, as one of the Concord's most decorated military commanders was effectively immobilized by a human cadet less than half his age. "Release him, cadet," Ambassador Linera finally ordered, her diplomatic instincts reasserting themselves. "Now!" Alara immediately complied, stepping back and resuming a formal stance. Kael'thar rolled to his side, clutching his shoulder, his scaled face contorted in a mixture of pain and humiliation. "KRYL security," he roared, and immediately several armed guards rushed forward, weapons trained on Alara. "Stand down," countered a new voice, deep, resonant, and carrying unmistakable authority. All eyes turned to see Commander Zyler, the Valerian head of station security, approaching with long, purposeful strides. His four eyes, characteristic of his species, took in the scene with calculating precision. "This incident will be formally investigated," Zyler announced. "General Kael'thar, are you injured?" "This human attacked a superior officer," Kael'thar snarled, regaining his feet with as much dignity as he could muster. "I demand she be detained immediately." Zyler's upper pair of eyes blinked in sequence, a Valerian expression of careful consideration. "According to multiple witnesses, you struck the cadet first, General. Physical assault initiates the right to proportional self-defense under Concord regulations." "Self-defense." Kael'thar's voice rose incredulously. She deliberately employed combat techniques against a commanding officer. "After you slapped her," Lieutenant Commander Zhou pointed out, stepping forward. "The security logs will confirm the sequence of events." Kael'thar's scales darkened further with rage. "This is an outrage." The human employed restricted knowledge of KRYL physiology to inflict deliberate pain. Such techniques are classified as specialized combat maneuvers, not defensive responses. Commander Zyler raised all four hands in a calming gesture. "These matters will be reviewed according to protocol. Cadet Vance, you are confined to the Terran diplomatic quarters pending investigation. General Kael'thar, medical assistance will be provided if required." "I require no assistance," Kael'thar spat, his pride clearly wounded more deeply than his body. His eyes fixed on Alara with undisguised hostility. "This incident is not concluded, human." As the KRYL security personnel escorted the general from the chamber, murmurs erupted among the watching delegates. Alara remained at attention, her heart racing despite her outwardly calm demeanor. Commander Zyler, Ambassador Linera addressed the security chief formally. The Terran delegation protests the detainment of Cadet Vance. She acted in legitimate self-defense after an unprovoked assault. Protocol must be followed, Ambassador, Zyler replied, though his tone was not unkind. But I assure you, all evidence will be considered impartially. As they were escorted from the chamber, Lieutenant Commander Zhou fell in his step beside Alara. That was either the most impressive or the most diplomatically catastrophic response I've ever witnessed, he murmured. What combat technique was that? It's not in the standard academy curriculum. Advanced xenophysiology adaptation, sir, Alara replied quietly. Special training module for cadets in the diplomatic security track. Ambassador Linera, walking ahead of them, shook her head slightly. When we return to the quarters, Cadet Vance, we need to have a serious discussion about proportional response and diplomatic consequences. Yes, Ambassador, Alara acknowledged, the full import of what had just occurred beginning to sink in. She had physically subdued a high-ranking officer of a founding Concord species, in full view of multiple diplomatic delegations. Whatever happened next, the consequences would be far-reaching. General Kaildar paced the confines of his private quarters, still seething with fury and humiliation. The medical officer had departed after confirming that no permanent damage had been inflicted, a fact that somehow made the situation even more galling. A human cadet had publicly overpowered him with such precision that she hadn't even caused injury significant enough to justify severe penalties. Impossible, he muttered, flexing his shoulder where lingering discomfort persisted. Completely impossible. He activated his console, bringing up the security footage of the incident. Watching it only intensified his rage. The human female's movements had been flawlessly executed, with a speed and precision that belied everything he had assumed about Terran capabilities. Ow! He demanded of the empty room. How could she possibly know the precise nerve cluster placement? That information is restricted even within KRYLL military circles. A soft tone announced an incoming communication. Kaildar composed himself before accepting the call, the holographic display materializing to reveal the stern visage of High Commander Vex, his direct superior in the KRYLL Defense Force. General, the High Commander began, without preamble, explanation required for the incident with the Terran cadet. Kaildar straightened. High Commander, the human delegation displayed insubordination and disrespect. When the cadet persisted in her impertinence, I administered a traditional disciplinary response. The human then employed restricted combat techniques targeting specific KRYLL vulnerabilities, knowledge that should not be available to Terran personnel. Vex's expression remained impassive. The footage has already been reviewed by High Command. Your actions violated multiple diplomatic protocols. With respect, High Commander, the greater concern should be how humans have acquired detailed knowledge of KRYLL physiology and combat vulnerabilities. This represents a significant security breach. That matter is being investigated, Vex acknowledged, but it does not excuse a decorated general striking a diplomatic trainee. The political ramifications are substantial. Kaildar felt his scales flush with renewed anger. The humans must learn their place in the Concord hierarchy. They presume equality when they have yet to prove their worthiness. Their worthiness is not yours to determine, General, Vex said flatly. The Terran Alliance was admitted to the Concord by unanimous vote of the Council, including the KRYLL representative. A political decision that ignored military reality, Kaildar countered. Humans lack the physical capabilities, the discipline, the evolutionary advantages that a human cadet just demonstrated against you. Vex interrupted, his tone sharp. The footage is being viewed throughout the Concord, General. The narrative is not favorable to our position. Kaildar fell silent, the full implications dawning on him. His actions hadn't put humans in their place. They had instead provided a public demonstration of human capability that contradicted centuries of KRYLL dismissiveness. "What are your orders, High Commander?" he asked finally, his voice tight with suppressed emotion. "Contain the damage," Vex replied. "The investigation will proceed, but you will issue a formal acknowledgement of protocol violation. Claim stress due to security concerns if you must save face, but the incident must be de-escalated." And the human? She employed restricted combat knowledge against a superior officer. She employed proportional self-defense after being physically assaulted. Vex corrected him. Her techniques were impressive, but not illegal. Focus on the security concerns, how humans acquired such detailed knowledge of our physiology, rather than the incident itself. After the communication ended, Kaeldar returned to the security footage, studying it with greater analytical detachment. The humans' movements had been precise, efficient, almost KRYLL-like in their economy. Yet there was something distinctly Terran in her adaptability. The way she had seamlessly integrated knowledge of his species' vulnerabilities into what appeared to be a foundation of human martial techniques. Perhaps, he reluctantly admitted to himself, there was more to these creatures than he had allowed himself to recognize. His console chimed again, this time with a priority message from Commander Zyler. The report contained something that instantly banished all other concerns from Kaeldar's mind. The environmental system's sabotage had been traced. It wasn't Terran in origin as he had implied. It was the work of a radical splinter group known as the Purity Doctrine, an extremist organization dedicated to expelling lesser species from a Concord. Most alarmingly, the report indicated evidence of a larger plot targeting the upcoming summit. The sabotage had merely been a test run. Kaeldar's military instincts immediately overrode his personal humiliation. If the Purity Doctrine was involved, the threat was serious. The extremist group had been responsible for several deadly attacks in recent years, including the bombing of a mixed-species colony that had claimed over 200 lives. He was composing orders for increased security measures when his quarters suddenly plunged into darkness. Emergency lighting activated a moment later, bathing the room in a dim red glow. "Security status," Kaeldar demanded, activating his comm unit. The response came through broken and distorted. Station-wide power. Under attack. Multiple sectors. Breach in level 7. Kaeldar reached for his sidearm and ceremonial blade. A KRYL officer was never truly off-duty. Whatever his personal feelings about humans, his duty to the Concord was clear. The summit and everyone aboard the station were now his responsibility to protect. Confined to the Terran diplomatic quarters, Ilera sat stiffly on the edge of her bunk, still processing the events of the past hour. Ambassador Linera had delivered a measured reprimand, acknowledging that Ilera's self-defense was justified, but questioning the diplomatic wisdom of demonstrating such capabilities so publicly. The general's behavior was inexcusable, Linera had concluded, but your response has potentially complicated relations with the KRYL, one of the Concord's most powerful founding members. Now alone with her thoughts, Ilera found herself torn between satisfaction at having stood up for herself and her species, and concern about the wider implications. The Academy had trained her to defend herself, but also to consider the bigger picture, the complex web of interspecies relations that defined Concord politics. Her reflection was interrupted as the lights suddenly flickered and died, replaced moments later by the dull crimson glow of emergency systems. The communications panel by the door lit up, and Lieutenant Commander Zhou's voice came through, tense and authoritative. "All personnel, secure stations. Possible security breach in progress. Diplomatic staff remain in quarters until..." The transmission cut off abruptly. Ilera rose to her feet, instinctively reaching for the utility belt that contained her basic equipment. Academy training kicked in. Assess the situation, identify resources, determine appropriate action. A muffled explosion somewhere distant sent a vibration through the deck plating. This wasn't a drill or a minor system failure. The station was under attack. Protocol dictated that she remain in quarters during a security alert, but the abrupt termination of Zhou's communication suggested the chain of command might be compromised. After a moment's hesitation, Ilera made her decision. She activated her personal communicator, setting it to the encrypted emergency channel used by Terran security personnel. "This is Cadet Vance," she transmitted. "Status report requested. Over." Static answered her, occasionally broken by fragments of communication too distorted to interpret. Either the station's communication systems were being jammed, or the emergency channels were overloaded. A soft tone from her datapad drew her attention. The device was displaying a security alert, not from the station's systems, but from a subroutine she had programmed during the journey to Vanguard. The alert indicated unusual access patterns in the station's environmental controls, the same systems that had malfunctioned earlier. Alara frowned, accessing the data stream. During the initial briefing, she had discreetly connected her pad to the station's information network, a technically unauthorized access that she had justified as necessary background research. Now that connection was providing limited information about the unfolding crisis. The pattern was clear: systematic takeover of critical station systems, beginning with communications and environmental controls. This wasn't random sabotage. It was a coordinated attack following classic insurgent methodology. A new alert appeared. Life support systems in the diplomatic sector were being reconfigured. Oxygen levels were being gradually reduced, so subtly that occupants might lose consciousness before realizing anything was wrong. That decided her. Protocol or not, she couldn't remain passive while the station, and potentially the entire diplomatic corps, was under threat. Alara moved to the door, finding it locked as expected. The emergency override would normally require ambassador-level authorization, but Alara had another approach. From her utility belt, she removed a small device that resembled a standard power cell. It was, in fact, a specialized academy tool designed for emergency evacuations, technically restricted to graduated officers, but Alara had earned special dispensation due to her assignment to the diplomatic mission. The device interfaced with the door's control panel, executing a rapid sequence of override commands. After a tense moment, the panel flashed green, and the door slid open with a hydraulic hiss. The corridor beyond was deserted, illuminated only by emergency lighting. Distant alarms could be heard, along with what might have been weapons fire several sectors away. Alara moved with purpose, her footsteps nearly silent thanks to academy training. Her destination was the environmental control hub for the diplomatic sector. If she could reach it, she might be able to prevent the life support tampering and potentially gather more information about the attack. As she navigated the dimly lit corridors, Alara encountered signs of struggle. Scorch marks from energy weapons, abandoned equipment, and in one intersection, dark stains that appeared to be blood of indeterminate species. She froze at the sound of approaching footsteps, heavy, measured, and accompanied by the distinctive click of KRYLL talons on the deck plating. Pressing herself into a recessed doorway, Alara held her breath as the figure came. Into view, General Kaeldar moved with predatory grace despite his earlier injury, an impressive energy rifle clutched in his scaled hands. His ceremonial armor had been replaced with combat gear, and his expression was one of focused intensity rather than the contempt she had witnessed earlier. Alara had a split-second choice: remain hidden or reveal herself to the very officer she had humiliated hours before. Professional judgment overrode personal concern. She stepped forward, hands visible to show she wasn't a threat. "General Kaeldar," she said quietly. The KRYLL spun with impressive speed, weapon raised, then narrowed his eyes as he recognized her. "Cadet Vance, you should be confined to quarters. Life support in the diplomatic sector is being tampered with," she reported crisply. "Oxygen levels are being reduced. I detected the pattern through my datapad connection to station systems." Kaeldar's expression flickered with something: surprise, suspicion, or perhaps reluctant respect. "Unauthorized access to station systems is a security violation." "Yes, sir. I'll accept any consequences after the current crisis is resolved." She held up her datapad, displaying the alert. "The environmental controls are being systematically altered throughout the diplomatic sector. At current rates, the ambassadorial staff will lose consciousness within 20 minutes. Kaeldar studied the data, his tactical mind evidently processing the implications. After a moment, he gave a curt nod. The attack is more coordinated than initially assumed. Station security is compromised, communications are down, and several defense systems have been overridden. Do we know who's responsible? Preliminary evidence suggests the purity doctrine, Kaeldar replied, seemingly deciding that sharing information took precedence over protocol in the current situation. Extremists opposed to Concord expansion. Alara absorbed this. The purity doctrine was notorious even in Terran intelligence briefings, a violent movement dedicated to preserving the purity of the original Concord species and expelling newer members. Their likely objective? She asked. Maximum diplomatic casualties, Kaeldar said grimly. If they succeed in eliminating key representatives from multiple species during a high-profile summit, it would destabilize the entire Concord, Alara finished, especially if blame could be directed at a specific member species. Kaeldar gave her an appraising look. Your assessment aligns with mine. I'm proceeding to the Secondary Security Control Center to attempt to restore station systems. You should return to your quarters. Alara stood her ground. With respect, General, I can be of assistance. I have specialized training in environmental systems and computer security. And, she added with measured confidence, as you've seen, I can handle myself in a confrontation. For a moment, she thought Kaeldar would refuse. His mandibles tightened in what she recognized as a KRYLL expression of irritation. But the tactical reality apparently outweighed his personal feelings. Very well, Cadet, he finally said, but you will follow my orders explicitly. This is not a diplomatic exercise. It is a combat situation. Understood, sir. They moved through the station with coordinated efficiency, Kaeldar leading with Alara covering their rear. Despite the tension of the situation and the lingering awkwardness of their previous encounter, they fell into a surprisingly effective partnership. Kaeldar's centuries-old military tradition complemented Alara's more adaptable approach. When they encountered a sealed security door blocking their path to the environmental controls, Kaeldar prepared to use brute force with an explosive charge. Alara quickly intervened. General, wait, she said, studying the locking mechanism. That could trigger additional security protocols. Allow me. Somewhat skeptically, Kaeldar stepped aside. Alara connected her datapad to the door's interface, fingers flying across the surface as she implemented a bypass sequence. This is a standard Concord security protocol, she explained as she worked. But there's a vulnerability in the emergency override system that the Academy identified during a cooperative security exercise last year. The KRYL Defense Force was not informed of such a vulnerability, Kaeldar noted, his tone suggesting this was yet another grievance to add to his list. The information was shared with the Concord Security Council, Alara replied, focused on her task. I believe implementation of the patch was scheduled for next quarter system update. The door slid open with a soft hiss, and Alara couldn't entirely suppress a small smile of satisfaction. Kaeldar made a sound that might have been grudging approval before taking point once more. The environmental control room beyond was deserted but showed signs of recent activity. Control panels lit with warning indicators, diagnostic systems running emergency protocols. Alara moved immediately to the main console, assessing the situation. They've initiated a systematic purge of breathable atmosphere in all diplomatic quarters, she reported, replacing it with a sedative gas mixture, non-lethal but designed to incapacitate. Can you reverse it? I can try to override, but they've locked out the main controls with an encryption I don't recognize. Alara's fingers moved across the interface, probing for weaknesses. I need more access. Kaeldar moved to a secondary console, entering a high-level security code. My general's override should provide temporary administrative access. The system accepted his credentials, and immediately more options became available to Alara. She worked quickly, countermanding the atmospheric alterations and initiating emergency ventilation protocols. I've stopped the gas deployment and started purging the affected areas, she announced. But whoever did this will know we've interfered. We should. The door they had entered through suddenly slammed shut, and a new alarm began to sound, high-pitched and urgent. Containment protocol, Kaeldar growled, moving to the door and examining the seal. We're locked in. Alara checked the environmental readings for their location. Air quality stable for now, but she broke off as a new alert flashed on her screen. They're redirecting coolant from the reactor core. Temperature in this sector will reach lethal levels in approximately 15 minutes. Can you override? Not from here. The commands are coming from the primary control center. This was a trap. They anticipated someone would try to reverse the atmospheric tampering. Kaeldar's expression darkened. They're more tactically sophisticated than previous Purity Doctrine operations. This suggests external support or new leadership. Alara continued working at the console, searching for options. I might be able to access the emergency communication system, bypass the main network that's been compromised. Do it, Kaeldar ordered, examining the room for alternative exits. If we can alert uncompromised security personnel. Alara's focus narrowed to the task at hand, filtering out everything except the complex system before her. The Academy's specialized training included techniques for maintaining peak cognitive function under stress, breathing control, mental focusing exercises, and biofeedback methods that helped optimize brain activity. Minutes ticked by as she worked, the room gradually growing warmer as the sabotage temperature controls took effect. Sweat beaded on her forehead, but her hands remained steady. I've accessed a maintenance communication channel, she finally announced. It's limited range, but it should reach the secondary security center. Kaeldar moved to her side, his scaled skin glistening with moisture in the increasingly humid environment. Security center, this is General Kaeldar. Authentication code, Crimson 7 Delta Nexus. Respond. Static crackled, then a voice responded, distorted but understandable. General, this is Commander Zyler. The station is under coordinated attack. Multiple hostiles identified as Purity Doctrine operatives. They've taken control of primary systems and have secured the main docking bay. Status of diplomatic personnel? Ambassador Linera and several others have been evacuated to secure location beta. Others are trapped or unaccounted for. The attackers appear to be converging on the summit chamber. We believe they intend to detonate a high-yield explosive to eliminate all delegates simultaneously. Alara and Kaeldar exchanged grim looks. If the Purity Doctrine succeeded, it would be the deadliest terrorist attack in Concord history, and potentially the beginning of its dissolution. We're trapped in Environmental Control Substation 12, Kaeldar reported. Containment protocols engaged, temperature rising to lethal levels. Attempting to override remotely, Zyler responded. But systems are compromised. You may need to. The transmission dissolved into static. Connection lost, Alara reported, trying alternative frequencies without success. The temperature continued to climb, now reaching uncomfortable levels even for the heat-tolerant KRYLL. Kaeldar moved to the wall panels, examining them methodically. There must be a maintenance access point. Standard station design includes emergency exits from all critical systems rooms. Alara joined him in the search, scanning the increasingly hot air for any sign of an access panel. The room had begun to shimmer with heat haze, making it difficult to focus. There, she said suddenly, pointing to a subtle seam in the wall paneling. That doesn't match the standard bulkhead design. Kaeldar examined the area she indicated, then nodded. Maintenance shaft access, sealed with security bolts. He raised his weapon. Stand back. Wait, Alara cautioned. Energy discharge in this environment could trigger fire suppression systems, which might also be compromised. She reached for her utility belt again, producing a compact multi-tool. Let me try something less dramatic first. The KRYL general watched with evident skepticism as she approached the panel and began carefully manipulating the specialized tool around the edges of the hidden access point. The work required precision, made more difficult by the increasingly oppressive heat and the growing discomfort of potential hyperthermia. Academy training includes practical engineering applications, she explained through gritted teeth as she worked. including emergency access to standard Concord structural systems. With a final twist of her tool, the panel released with a soft click, revealing a narrow maintenance shaft beyond. "Well done, Cadet," Kaeldar acknowledged, his earlier contempt notably absent. "You first. Your smaller frame will navigate more easily." Alara didn't waste time on ceremony, immediately sliding into the confined space. The shaft was tight even for her human dimensions. For Kaeldar's bulkier KRYLL physiology, it would be a significant challenge. But it was their only option as the temperature in the room continued its dangerous climb. She crawled forward, using her datapad's light to illuminate the path ahead. Behind her, she could hear Kaeldar struggling to fit his larger frame through the opening. His breathing labored from the combination of exertion and heat stress. "The shaft appears to connect to a main maintenance tunnel 50 meters ahead," she called back. "If we can reach it, we should be able to access multiple station sectors." Kaeldar's response was a grunt of acknowledgement, followed by the scrape of scales against metal as he forced himself forward. They continued this way for several minutes, the confined space making progress slow and uncomfortable. Alara maintained a steady pace, conscious that their survival, and potentially that of the entire diplomatic corps, depended on reaching the security center in time. When they finally emerged into a larger maintenance tunnel, both were sweat-soaked and breathing heavily. The air here was cooler, though still above normal station parameters. Emergency lighting cast everything in a dim red glow. "Which way to the security center?" Alara asked, consulting her datapad's limited schematic of the station. Kaeldar oriented himself quickly. "East Junction, then 2 levels up. These maintenance tunnels should provide access most of the way, avoiding main corridors where hostiles are likely operating." They set off at a rapid pace, moving with as much stealth as possible given the urgency of their mission. Kaeldar took the lead again, his KRYLL night vision better suited to the dim emergency lighting. As they approached a junction, he suddenly raised a hand in warning, dropping into a combat crouch. Alara immediately went still, listening intently. Voices echoed from an intersecting tunnel, unfamiliar, and speaking in a language her translator didn't immediately recognize. Kaeldar gestured her closer and whispered, "Purity Doctrine operatives. They're discussing the progress of the attack." His eyes narrowed as he listened. 3 individuals, armed with disruptor rifles. They're saying the explosive device is already in place at the summit chamber. Alara's mind raced through options. We're outnumbered, and they're between us and the security center. Kaeldar checked his weapon. "I can engage them directly. You continue to the security center while I provide distraction." The proposal was tactically sound, but something in Alara rebelled against the idea of splitting up. With respect, General, a coordinated approach might be more effective. If we can neutralize them quickly, we can proceed together and potentially gain valuable intelligence. The KRYLL studied her for a moment, then gave a slight nod. "Your proposal has merit. What do you suggest?" Alara quickly outlined a simple but effective plan. Minutes later, they were in position. Kaeldar concealed at the junction with his weapon ready, Alara farther back with her utility belt partially disassembled. When she activated the improvised sonic emitter she had created, it produced a high-pitched whine that echoed through the metal tunnels, a sound remarkably similar to a malfunctioning power conduit about to overload. The reaction was immediate. The voices in the connecting tunnel went silent, then urgent whispers followed by cautious footsteps approaching the junction. As the first operative appeared, a helmeted figure clutching an advanced weapon, Kaeldar remained perfectly still, allowing the enemy to advance further into the trap. When all 3 had entered the junction, investigating the source of the alarming sound, Alara remotely increased the emitter's output. The sudden spike in frequency caused the operatives to flinch and cover their audio receptors, the momentary distraction Kaeldar needed. The KRYLL general moved with explosive speed, his first strike disarming the nearest operative before the enemy could bring his weapon to bear. The second received a precision blow to what appeared to be a vulnerable joint in their environmental suit, immediately incapacitating them. The third operative managed to raise their weapon, but Alara was already in motion, sliding into the junction and executing a low, sweeping kick that took the attackers' legs from under them. As they fell, Kaeldar delivered a final decisive strike that rendered them unconscious. The entire encounter had lasted less than 10 seconds and had been conducted in near silence. No energy weapons discharged to alert other hostiles to their presence. Alara quickly secured the unconscious operatives with restraint from her utility belt while Kaeldar examined their equipment. Unmarked armor, he noted. Military grade. Higher quality than previous Purity Doctrine operations. He removed a helmet from one of the fallen attackers, revealing a face that caused him to hiss in surprise. Interesting. Alara glanced over, recognizing the distinctive cranial ridge of a Nexary, one of the Concord's founding species alongside the KRYLL. A Nexary? I thought the Purity Doctrine was primarily composed of KRYLL extremists. That was the prevailing intelligence assessment. Kaeldar acknowledged, his expression troubled. This suggests the movement has expanded its reach. Or perhaps, he didn't complete the thought, instead examining a communication device taken from one of the operatives. Their tactical network is still active, he announced. They're using a frequency outside standard Concord monitoring ranges. He manipulated the device, listening through an earpiece. After a moment, his expression darkened further. The detonation is scheduled for 20 minutes from now, time to coincide with the emergency gathering of all diplomatic personnel in the designated safe zone. It's a trap, Alara realized. They're using the station's own emergency protocols to gather all their targets in one location. Precisely. Kaeldar rose, his decision made. We have no time to reach the security center. We must proceed directly to the safe zone and evacuate the diplomatic corps before detonation. Alara nodded, gathering the seized weapons. These might be useful. Kaeldar accepted one of the disruptor rifles, testing its balance with professional assessment. Your combat performance was adequate, he said, in what appeared to be an attempt at a compliment. Where did you acquire such skills? The reports on human military capabilities did not suggest this level of proficiency. The Terran Alliance Space Academy has evolved its training significantly in recent years, Alara replied, checking the charge on the second weapon. We recognized our physical limitations compared to some species and compensated with integrated training, combining traditional combat techniques with xenobiological knowledge and adaptive technologies. Clearly, Kaeldar said dryly, though without the contemptuous edge that had marked his earlier interactions. Gulme, we have limited time. They moved with renewed urgency through the maintenance tunnels. Kaeldar, now using the capture communication device to track enemy movements and avoid patrols. The journey to the diplomatic safe zone would require traversing several sectors of the station, including areas likely under hostile control. As they emerged from the maintenance system into a service corridor, they encountered their first evidence of serious combat. Scorch marks on the walls, destroyed equipment, and the bodies of station security personnel. Precision strikes, Kaeldar observed grimly, examining the fallen defenders. These were not killed in chaotic exchanges, but by coordinated assassination teams targeting security response capabilities. How many attackers are we dealing with? Alara asked, helping him collect additional ammunition from the fallen. Based on the communication chatter, approximately 30 operatives. A small force, but highly trained and with the advantage of surprise and system control. They continued forward, encountering sporadic resistance that they dealt with efficiently, sometimes through stealth, sometimes through brief, decisive combat. Their teamwork improved with each engagement, Kaeldar's strength and combat experience complementing Alara's agility and technical knowledge. As they approached the diplomatic safe zone, a reinforced section of the station designed to withstand various catastrophic scenarios, Kaeldar held up a hand for caution. The main access will be watched, he said, studying a station schematic they had acquired from a security terminal. There's a maintenance entry here, but it will likely be guarded as well. Alara studied the schematic, noting a detail. There's a tertiary access point through the environmental regulation system. It's narrow, normally used only for repair drones. Kildar looked skeptical. Too small for either of us. Not necessarily, Alara countered. If we can locate and control one of the maintenance drones, we could use it to establish a communication link with those inside. Warn them about the trap. It was a desperate plan, but with time running short, they had few alternatives. They located a drone access port and, with Alara's technical skills, managed to override its programming. The small, spider-like machine responded to their commands, scuttling into the narrow maintenance shaft that led to the safe zone's environmental systems. Using the drone's camera feed on her datapad, Alara guided it through the complex network of ducts and access tunnels. The minutes ticked by with excruciating slowness as the drone navigated obstacles and narrow passages. 5 minutes to scheduled detonation. Kildar reported tensely, monitoring the captured communication device. Finally, the drone emerged into the environmental control node within the safe zone. Through its camera, they could see dozens of diplomatic personnel gathered in the main chamber beyond, representatives from every Concord species, including Ambassador Linera and the rest of the Terran delegation. I can access the safe zone's communication system through this node, Alara said, fingers dancing across her datapad interface. Establishing link now. The drone extended a connection probe, interfacing with the safe zone systems. After a moment of tense waiting, Alara's face lit with success. Connection established. We can broadcast to the internal communication network. Kildar immediately took charge. Attention all diplomatic personnel. This is General Kildar of KRYLL Security Command. The safe zone has been compromised. A high-yield explosive device has been planted. Immediate evacuation required. Repeat, the safe zone is compromised. Evacuate immediately. Through the drone's camera, they watched as confusion swept through the gathered diplomats. Several security officers moved to check systems, while others appeared to be arguing about the validity of the warning. They're hesitating, Alara said urgently. They think it might be a false alarm or part of the attack. Kildar growled in frustration. Ambassador Linera, he called specifically. This is not deception. The Purity Doctrine has orchestrated this crisis to gather all diplomatic personnel in one location for elimination. Cadet Vance is with me, she can confirm. At the mention of her name, Alara saw Ambassador Linera's head snap up, searching for the source of the communication. Alara quickly took over the broadcast. Ambassador, this is Cadet Vance. General Kildar is correct. The safe zone is targeted for detonation in, she checked the countdown, less than 4 minutes. The attackers used the station's emergency protocols against us. You must evacuate immediately through the secondary exit corridor. This time, the response was immediate. Ambassador Linera began directing personnel toward the evacuation route, her authority helping to cut through the confusion. Station security officers moved to assist, organizing the diverse diplomatic corps into a rapid evacuation procedure. It's working, Alara reported, watching through the drone feed as the chamber began to empty. But they may not all clear the blast radius in time. Kildar had been examining the schematic more carefully. There's another approach. If we can reach the device itself, we might be able to disarm it or at least contain the explosion. How? We don't know its exact location. The drone, Kildar said, pointing to her datapad. If the device is within the safe zone's environmental system, the drone might be able to locate it. Alara immediately redirected the drone, sending it deeper into the environmental network, scanning for anything unusual. The minutes continued to count down as the mechanical spider methodically searched the system. There, Kildar suddenly pointed at the screen. In a junction of several major environmental ducts, a sleek metallic device had been attached to the station's primary life support conduit for the safe zone. That's a Nexary demolition charge, military grade, designed to rupture the life support system and release synchronized plasma bursts through the ventilation network. Can the drone disarm it? Unlikely. but it might be able to detach and relocate it to a containment area. Kaeldar reached for the drone controls. "Allow me. I've had training with these devices." Alara surrendered control of the drone, watching as Kaeldar guided it with surprising dexterity. The KRYLL directed the machine to examine the explosive device from multiple angles, assessing its attachment mechanisms and trigger systems. "The primary detonator is here," he indicated on the screen. "If the drone can sever this connection without triggering the secondary failsafe." With delicate precision, he manipulated the drone's maintenance tools, carefully disengaging one connection after another. Sweat beaded on his scaled brow as he worked, the countdown now showing less than 2 minutes remaining. "Almost," he murmured, focused entirely on the delicate operation. "The final connection is the most critical. If mishandled, it will trigger immediate detonation." Alara held her breath as Kaeldar directed the drone for the final, crucial disconnection. The machine's pincer extended, grasped the component with microscopic precision, and with an expert twist, separated it from the main device. "Connection severed," Kaeldar announced, his voice tight with controlled tension. "The primary detonator is neutralized, but the secondary system will still activate on the timer. The drone needs to move the device to a containment area immediately." He guided the drone to grasp the now partially disarmed explosive, carefully lifting it from its mounting position. The machine struggled slightly under the weight, but managed to begin moving through the duct system, heading toward an automated waste disposal unit that would eject the device into space. 40 seconds, Alara counted down, watching the timer still visible on the explosives display. "The drone's movement is slower than optimal. It will be sufficient," Kaeldar asserted, though his tense posture belied his confident words. They watched in tense silence as the drone navigated the final stretch of ductwork, the ejection system now visible ahead. With 20 seconds remaining, the drone deposited the device into the automated unit, and Kaeldar immediately triggered the emergency ejection sequence. The station's systems responded, the waste unit sealing and beginning its evacuation procedure. At 5 seconds remaining on the device's timer, the outer doors opened and vacuum pulled the explosive into space. A moment later, a silent flash of light illuminated the exterior camera feed, the device detonating harmlessly in the void. Alara released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Containment successful. Kaeldar sat back, the tension in his posture easing slightly. The immediate threat is neutralized, but the station is still under hostile control, and there may be additional explosives or attack vectors we are unaware of. A new transmission suddenly came through on the captured communication device, urgent and filled with alarm. "Primary detonation failed," a voice reported. "Diplomatic targets are evacuating. Security forces are regrouping near the auxiliary docking bay." Another voice responded, authoritative and cold. "Initiate contingency protocol. If we cannot eliminate them all, we will take what targets we can. Deploy strike teams to intercept the evacuation route." Kaeldar and Alara exchanged grim looks. They had prevented the main attack, but the danger was far from over. "We need to warn them," Alara said, already reaching for her datapad to re-establish communication with the evacuating diplomats. "Communication carries too much risk of interception," Kaeldar countered. "We must intercept the strike teams directly." He rose, checking his weapon. The most logical ambush point would be the junction between sectors 7 and 8, a natural bottleneck in the evacuation route. "That's at least 4 minutes away at top speed," Alara calculated, consulting the station schematic. "We may not reach it before the diplomats do." "Then we move faster," Kaeldar stated simply, already heading for the exit. "Come, Cadet. Your academy training is about to face its ultimate field test." The final confrontation unfolded at the predicted junction, a desperate battle against a Purity Doctrine strike team that had established an ambush position moments before Kaeldar and Alara arrived. The diplomatic evacuation was mere seconds away from walking into a massacre. What followed tested both of them to their limits. Kaeldar fought with the skill and ferocity that had earned him his rank, while Alara demonstrated that her earlier performance against him had been no fluke. Together, they engaged the numerically superior force in a lightning-fast assault that disrupted the ambush and warned the approaching diplomats. Ambassador Linera, leading the evacuation, immediately organized the security personnel at her disposal into a defensive formation, protecting the non-combatant diplomats as they retreated to an alternative route. The battle was chaotic and brutal. At a crucial moment, Alara found herself defending a fallen Kaeldar from two attackers after the general had taken a disruptor blast to his side, protecting a Valerian diplomat. Despite her training, she was nearly overwhelmed until Kaeldar, drawing on reserves of strength that seemed impossible given his injury, rejoined the fight at the critical moment. When it was over, the Purity Doctrine forces had been neutralized, and station security, rallied by Commander Zyler, had begun systematically reclaiming control of Vanguard station systems. The attack had been defeated, though not without cost. 2 days later, with the station secure and emergency repairs underway, Alara stood at attention before a hastily convened review board in one of the few undamaged conference rooms. Her uniform was pristine, betraying none of the bruises and minor injuries that lay beneath it. Ambassador Linera sat among the panel members, alongside Commander Zyler and representatives from 3 other Concord species. Conspicuously absent was General Kaeldar, still recovering in the medical bay. Cadet Vance, Commander Zyler began, his 4 eyes blinking in their characteristic sequence. This board has reviewed the events surrounding the Purity Doctrine attack on Vanguard Station. Your actions during this crisis were unconventional. Alara remained at attention, face forward. Yes, Commander. You violated confinement orders, accessed restricted systems without authorization, engaged in combat operations outside your assigned duties, and collaborated with General Kaeldar despite a pending investigation into your prior altercation. Zyler's tone was neutral, stating facts rather than rendering judgment. Those statements are accurate, Commander. A brief silence followed before Ambassador Linera spoke. They're also incomplete, Commander Zyler. Cadet Vance's actions, while technically violations of protocol, directly contributed to saving the lives of the entire diplomatic corps and preventing what would have been a devastating blow to the Galactic Concord. Commander Zyler inclined his head in acknowledgement. Indeed, the board has taken this into consideration. We have also received an unusual communication from General Kaeldar. This caught Alara by surprise, though she maintained her composed expression. Zyler activated a holographic display, and Kaeldar's image appeared. The general propped up in a medical bay bed, his scales pale from injury, but his posture still rigidly formal. I, General Kaeldar of the KRYLL Defense Force, formally withdraw all complaints and charges against Cadet Alara Vance of the Terran Alliance, the recording stated. Further, I officially commend her actions during the Vanguard Station crisis. Her combat proficiency, technical knowledge, and tactical decision-making demonstrated qualities that would be commendable in any KRYLL officer, let alone a cadet of a species with far less military experience. The recording paused briefly, and Alara detected what appeared to be a moment of internal struggle before Kaeldar continued. I acknowledge that my initial assessment of both Cadet Vance and human capabilities was incorrect. My conduct toward her was unbecoming of an officer and violated Concord protocols regarding interspecies respect and cooperation. I formally apologize for this lapse and recommend that Cadet Vance receive appropriate recognition for her service to the Concord. The recording ended, leaving a startled silence in the conference room. Such an admission from a KRYLL officer, particularly one of Kaeldar's stature, was virtually unprecedented. Commander Zyler deactivated the display. In light of General Kaeldar's statement and our own review of events, this board finds that while protocols were technically violated, the extraordinary circumstances and outcomes justify waiving any disciplinary action. Ambassador Linera leaned forward. Cadet Vance, your actions reflect the highest traditions of the Terran Alliance Space Academy and the principles of the Galactic Concord itself. Consider your field assessment complete, with distinction. The formal proceedings concluded shortly thereafter, with Alara receiving not punishment but commendation. As the board members filed out, Ambassador Linera approached her privately. "That was quite an impression you made on the general," she said with a hint of amusement. "I've known Kaeldar by reputation for years. He's never admitted error in my memory, much less apologized." "It was a unique situation, Ambassador," Alara replied diplomatically. "Indeed." Linera studied her thoughtfully. "The general has also requested that you visit him in the medical bay before our departure. Apparently, he has a proposal regarding future Terrankar YLL security cooperation. I've approved the meeting, if you're willing." Alara nodded. "Of course, Ambassador." The medical bay was quiet, most of the casualties from the attack having been treated and released. General Kaeldar occupied a private room, his large frame making the standard medical bed appear almost comically small. He looked up as Alara entered, his reptilian features unreadable to most, but she had learned to detect the subtle cues of KRYLL expression during their brief but intense collaboration. "Cadet Vance," he acknowledged. "You received my message." "Yes, General. Thank you for your statement to the review board." Kaeldar made a dismissive gesture with one clawed hand. "It was factually accurate. Nothing more." He shifted slightly, wincing as the movement aggravated his healing wound. "The doctors tell me another few centimeters and the disruptor blast would have severed my primary cardiovascular channel. You moved quickly to eliminate the second attacker before he could finish what the first began. We were operating as a unit, sir. You would have done the same." "Perhaps." Kaeldar studied her with those ancient, reptilian eyes. "You know, the KRYLL have a saying, 'Truth is found in combat.' It means that the true nature of individuals and species is revealed not in words or diplomacy, but in how they face crisis and danger." He paused. "I have learned a truth about humans that was not in any of our intelligence briefings." Alara remained silent, allowing him to continue. "You are more formidable than your physical attributes suggest, not merely in combat technique, though that was impressive, but in adaptability, resourcefulness, and something else." He seemed to search for the word. "Determination, perhaps, or conviction. Those are qualities we value," Alara acknowledged. "They are qualities any warrior culture should value," Kaeldar responded. "Which brings me to my proposal. The Purity Doctrine's attack exposed significant vulnerabilities in Concord security protocols, vulnerabilities that might have been addressed if there had been better integration of different security perspectives." He reached for a data pad beside his bed, activating it with a clawed finger. "I am recommending the establishment of a joint KRYL Terran security training initiative. Selected personnel from both our militaries working together to develop new protocols that incorporate the strengths of each approach." Alara couldn't entirely hide her surprise. "That's progressive, General." "It is practical," Kaeldar corrected, though without rancor. "The investigation has confirmed that the Purity Doctrine has infiltrated elements of traditional Concord security forces. We face an enemy that understands our standard procedures and exploits our predictability. New approaches are required." He set the datapad aside. "I have recommended you as the Terran liaison for the initial program development. If you're interested." For a moment, Alara was speechless. The proposal represented an unprecedented opportunity, not just for her personally, but for human integration into Concord security operations. "I would be honored, General. But I'm still a cadet. Not for long. According to Ambassador Linera, your field performance has earned you an accelerated graduation recommendation." Kaeldar's mouth curved in what Alara now recognized as the KRYLL equivalent of a small smile. "And I suspect after recent events, few would question your qualifications." "Thank you, General. I will consider the offer carefully." "See that you do." Kaeldar shifted again, discomfort evident in his movement. "There is one other matter. Our initial encounter." Alara tensed slightly. The slap and her response seemed to have occurred in another lifetime, though it had been mere days. "The incident has become somewhat notorious throughout the Concord," Kaeldar continued. "Apparently, security footage was accessed and distributed by unknown parties. His expression showed a mix of resignation and irritation. I'm told there are now recreational simulations of the encounter being shared among junior officers of various species. Quite popular among the Terran contingents, I understand. Despite her best efforts, Alara couldn't entirely suppress a smile. I wouldn't know anything about that, sir. Of course not. Kaeldar regarded her with what might have been a hint of grudging amusement. Tell me, Cadet Vance, those combat techniques, they're not standard in your military, are they? No, sir. They're part of an experimental adaptive combat program. The Academy recognized that humans can't match many Concord species in raw strength or natural defenses, so we developed alternative approaches. Based on detailed xenophysiological knowledge, Kaeldar observed, knowledge that many would consider sensitive. The Terran Alliance has always emphasized understanding our galactic neighbors, Alara replied carefully, both for diplomatic and security purposes. Kaeldar made a sound that might have been a dry chuckle, a diplomatic way of saying, you've been studying our vulnerabilities since first contact. He waved off her beginning protest. It's what any sensible species would do. The KRYLL have extensive files on human physiological weaknesses as well. He leaned back, regarding her thoughtfully. Perhaps this is another area where our proposed joint initiative could be mutually beneficial, a formalized exchange of certain tactical information within appropriate parameters. That would be revolutionary, General. Indeed, his expression grew more serious. The attack on this station has made one thing clear. The true threat to the Concord comes not from new member species seeking their place, but from those who cannot accept evolution and change. He met her gaze directly. The KRYLL have survived for millennia by adapting to new challenges. It would be inconsistent to resist adaptation now. Alara recognized the significance of what Kaeldar was offering. Not just a training program, but the beginning of a fundamental shift in how the founding species viewed humanity and other newer members. I look forward to working with you, General, she said sincerely. As do I, Cadet Vance. He lifted a hand in what she recognized as a formal KRYLL salute, an honor rarely extended to non-KRYLL. You have proven yourself a worthy opponent and a valuable ally. The Concord will be stronger for contributions such as yours. 3 months later, Alara Vance, now Lieutenant Vance, stood at a viewport on the Terran diplomatic vessel returning to Vanguard Station. The massive installation gleamed against the backdrop of stars, its structure now fully repaired after the Purity Doctrine attack. Ambassador Linera joined her at the viewport. Ready for your new assignment, Lieutenant? As ready as I can be, Alara replied. The Joint Training Initiative has generated more interest than anyone expected. We have participants registered from 15 Concord species, not just KRYLL and humans. General Kaeldar's advocacy has been surprisingly influential, Linera noted. It seems your 3 seconds of combat made quite an impression. Alara smiled slightly. I think it was more the 20 hours of fighting side by side afterward that changed his perspective. Perhaps. The ambassador's expression grew thoughtful. You know, there's an old Earth saying, sometimes it takes a shock to open minds to new possibilities. Your encounter with the general, unfortunate as it seemed at the time, may have catalyzed something important for humanity's place in the Concord. The docking procedure began, the ship smoothly aligning with Vanguard Station's receiving bay. Through the viewport, Alara could see a small reception committee waiting, and among them, the distinctive green-scaled figure of General Kaeldar. A personal welcome from the general, Ambassador Linera observed with raised eyebrows. It seems you've made more than a military ally. He's still intimidating, arrogant, and set in his ways, Alara replied. But he's also brilliant, honorable, and willing to learn. That's a foundation we can build on. As the docking procedure completed and the diplomatic party prepared to disembark, Alara straightened her uniform, noting with satisfaction how the newly designed insignia of the Joint Security Initiative gleamed on her collar, a symbol combining KRYLL and human design elements. One slap had nearly derailed humanity's standing in the Concord. But 3 seconds later, It had set in motion changes that might ultimately strengthen it beyond anyone's expectations. Some lessons, it seemed, were worth the sting.